Now available in paperback and e-readers, E-Steam Ascension, The Devil's Dealer reaches a turning point in the life of this powerful E-Steam series story. Get E-Steam Ascension at online booksellers today. ABC is making plans to bring back 1980s sitcom Roseanne and 1990s sitcom Sister Sister back to its primetime schedule. And this is no different than what NBC did this year when it brought back 1990s sitcom Will and Grace back to its primetime schedule. However, when you take a look at this plan to bring back all these old sitcoms, it shows how much creativity has declined in American media ever since the Democratic President Bill Clinton signed the Telecommunications Bill of 1996 that the Republican Congress passed through. Because ever since that Telecommunications Bill of 1996 became law, creativity has gone on a steep decline here in America as it relates to television, radio, and movies. And we can see that this decline is continuing by these networks bringing back these old sitcoms. Ever since the formation of the Big Five media these days, which is now what was the Big Six, which was Sony, Warner Brothers, Fox, Disney, and Viacom, and Comcast, we have seen a complete decline as it relates to creativity in media. Now, back in the days before the Telecommunications Bill of 1996, the laws originally stated that only one person could own a single television station, radio station, and newspaper in a local area. And this allowed for competition to form as it related to the media. However, after the Telecommunications Bill of 1996 was passed, we saw companies buying each other, and we saw the formation of this Big Six, now Big Five oligarchy. Unfortunately, ever since we've had the formation of this Big Six, now going into Big Five oligarchy because Fox was just bought by Disney, we've seen a steep decline in creativity, imagination, and originality. And this is really starting to hit, a fever pitch as it relates to the complete decline of American media. Because when you see networks bringing back old sitcoms for primetime runs, it shows that you have executives at the top of these big oligarchical corporations who have no vision for the future, and the fact that they're stuck in the past. And they're thinking that bringing back these old sitcoms, which were ratings hits back in the day, is going to bring back viewers back to television. I'm sorry, that's not going to happen because these shows had their heyday back in the 1990s, and their time is up. And the fact that these executives still think that these shows still have some life in them shows how disconnected and out of touch they are with the changing world. Because bringing back 1990 sitcoms in 2018 shows that, again, these guys have absolutely no vision for the future and that they're still stuck in the past. I mean, these shows have been off the air. Roseanne has been off the air for about 20 years now, and Sister Sister's been off the air for about 18 years now, and Will and Grace has been off the air for about 18 years now. So these shows they've run their course, they're past their prime, and all it's doing is showing us that these executives don't live in our world. I mean, these shows were popular 2 decades ago. Today's millennials and Gen Y look at these shows and go, that's their father's sitcom, yet these executives are still acting like these shows are high-value properties that they need to reinvest more money in. And that's insane, especially when you consider the way Roseanne jumped the shark after those lottery episodes came on, and the fact that Sister Sister had an organic conclusion to its run. Now, I would think that these network executives would be smarter and go out here and spend money to create new projects. Unfortunately, they don't want to go out here and spend money on new projects. In fact, many of them are so scared to take any sort of risk. That's why we see them continuing to try to rehash old properties and trying to recycle old properties again and again and again, not understanding how apathetic and indifferent the audience has become to those properties, and how many of those properties are starting to now lose value because the people of this generation, the millennials, the Gen Y, they do not relate to these properties. And an example of this can be shown to us with the recent Star Wars trilogy. Now, the recent Star Wars trilogy, when The Force Awakens opened, yes, it opened strong, but when we look at The Last Jedi is starting to show us that there's a serious decline starting to head towards Star Wars. Star Wars merchandise is rotting on the shelves right now, and the Last Jedi had a steep decline in its second week at the box office. So it's showing me that these oligarchs were going out here buying up all this old property, like Disney going out here to buy Fox. That's a bad long-term investment, because when it comes down to these next generations, the millennials, the Gen Ys, the people who are in their teens and 20s, that they're going to have a bunch of properties you're going to try to push on these kids. And these kids are going to say, that's not my heroes, that's my dad's heroes, that's my dad's pop culture. And they're going to look at these old shows and say that's not theirs, and these companies are going to head towards bankruptcy and a complete collapse. Now, I'm looking at Hollywood, and that's where things are going for me, because I'm looking at box office numbers. The box office numbers are declining, and the ratings for television are declining, and I can all correlate it all towards that telecommunications bill of 1996, which stifled competition, because once these companies started buying each other, it led to the complete decline in imagination, creativity, new ideas. And the whole thing is that as television started to consolidate, we had people forming new forms of media on the internet, and those forms of media are what are appealing to the millennials, the Gen Y, and other generations that are coming up. And they're looking at creating their own properties on their own platform. However, the only reason why they created it on their own platform was because you had the Republican Congress and Bill Clinton sign that telecommunications bill of 1996, which signed the death warrant for television, radio, newspapers, and magazines. If they had not signed that legislation, we might have seen more competition in between television, radio, magazines, and newspapers. And that competition might have led to some organic innovation, which would have melded into the internet. However, as it looks right now, because they signed that piece of legislation, is leading to them, these old executives, still trying to rehash these old sitcoms. And that's mind-boggling when you think about it. Who would want to watch a gray-headed Roseanne Barr trying to do the same gags that she did back in the late 80s and early 90s, talking about a struggling working-class family, or trying to repair the damage from her struggling sitcom after she did those lottery episodes? Who would want to watch an old episode on 40-year-old Tia and Tamara Mowry on Sister Sister with Tim Reed and Jack A? Again, this is appealing to people of my generation who are in their mid-40s, but it's not going to be appealing to teens and tweens, which are a growing population and the bigger market. And again, it shows how completely out of touch these executives in the entertainment industry are, how these people in the big six are sitting in ivory towers still thinking that the world is running like it did in the 1990s. No, it's not running like it did in the 1990s. The job market is different, the world is different, and people don't see anything in art or literature from the mainstream media that relates to their life experience. And this is why people aren't going out here to go spend money on movies, watch television shows, or even buy magazines or comic books or books, because they don't see themselves related in that material. They don't see their life experiences in that material. They don't see their world in that material. And because they don't see their world in that material, that's why they're heading and migrating to platforms like Netflix, like Hulu, like Amazon, like YouTube, like Facebook. Well, not Facebook anymore, but Instagram and other platforms, because they see themselves and they see their experiences presented on those platforms. They don't see them on television. They don't see them in radio. They don't see them in newspapers. They don't see them in magazines. They don't see them in comic books. And all they're seeing there is a bunch of old people still trying to push old people like they were young over 20 years ago. And that shows me how deeply disconnected many of the executives in the big five are right now, that they're still trying to push old material, and the fact that they still have television shows these days that are going 10, 15, even 20, even 30 years, like The Simpsons is gone, and they're seeing that there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Now, those television shows like The Simpsons having 30-year-old runs, that's something that used to be done in communist countries. But here in a capitalist America, thanks to the Telecommunications Bill of 96 and the oligarchy running media, we now have that type of communist model running on television right now, where we have 30-year-old shows, 15-year-old shows, 10-year-old shows. I mean, I remember back in the 70s and the 80s and the early 90s, when there was competition before the Telecommunications Bill of 96, the average television show only lasted 5 years. Those performers rested, and then they moved on to other projects. But these days, because there is no competition and no incentive for competition or creativity, that's why we have shows like 2.5 Men, which had a 12-year run, Friends, which had a 10-year run. We had shows like Frasier, which had an 11-year run, and we had shows like The Big Bang Theory, which is going on a 12, almost 13-year run, and we've got shows like The Simpsons, which have pretty much run out of gas right now, going on 30-year runs, and it's all because we have all these old, disconnected executives who don't want to focus on the future and move ahead because they're afraid of risk, they're afraid of failure, they're afraid of growth, and I believe in some cases they're afraid of their own mortality, and they're afraid that if these shows die, it means that a part of them will die, and that's why they keep bringing back this old stuff, because they're afraid of a future where they have to think about them passing on and having nothing really to show for it. But I look at the big picture of this, and I see the Telecommunications Bill of 96 being the seeds of this complete decline in creativity, because when you have one group of people holding so much of the media in their hands, then all they do is present their views and their ideas on the media, and then when you have these people getting older, they become more and more out of touch. And because they're more and more out of touch, they're thinking that the ideas that they had in the past can be presented in the future as something new and original to a new audience, not understanding that the audience has grown and changed. And if you continue to present these old ideas on these platforms, those platforms are going to become eventually obsolete. And that's where television is looking to me right now, with this attempt to revive old sitcoms in prime time, instead of trying to make efforts to try to contact screenwriters like myself and other people who have fresh ideas towards presenting some new ideas on media platforms for the next generation of viewers and readers and other and consumers of media. If you'd like to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon by clicking the link in the description box. And if you want to try some of my SJS Direct publications, you can click the link to Amazon.com to pick them up in paperback or ebook. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.